Hey everybody, it's Keith Salmon, and here is our next in the series of our Million Dollar Stories. Today I've got a very special guest. Her name is Cece Hart, and she is an inspiration activist. Is that right, Cece?
Yeah, I love that term. I've kind of coined it to encompass all of the things that I'm doing. And it's really just focused on activating inspiration in people in all of the different ways that I've picked up around the globe along the way.
Great. That's awesome. Everybody, we're going to get to what that means in particulars, but I'm always interested in you live in Bali, right? And
Yeah,
you're from Canada. You're from Toronto?
I'm from like about 3 hours outside of Toronto, so about in between Ottawa and Toronto, really.
Awesome. So, would it be okay if I asked you about your journey and how is a Canadian girl like you doing in a place like Bali?
Sure, why not? Well, I grew up in Canada in a kind of a small town, and then I ended up going to school in Ottawa. And I always just really wanted to see the world, and so I guess that sparked the beginning of the journey. And I feel like whenever I graduated, I took an opportunity to go to Europe instead of taking a job right away. And because I did that, I saw part of the world, and it just inspired this love in my heart to learn more about other cultures and see new things, because I realized how sheltered I had been just, culturally. And so that was the first eureka moment where I felt so inspired by what was going on in the rest of the world. And so from there to here, I have kind of globe trotted all over the place, just trying to find where I belonged and going off of my instinct and my intuition and following my heart along the way. And so Bali, I was never meant to be here. I was only supposed to be here to visit my mother, and she didn't even make it here. And I ended up making this my, I guess we'll call it my home base for the last 3 years. And Keith, it was just this place that pulled me in like a magnet. As you might hear, if you ever talk to anybody that's, based in Bali or living in Bali, they'll say that to you.
Right.
It's kind of this vortex where it brings people in, and it says you don't really have a choice. You're staying here until you do what you're meant to do here, and then you can leave after.
Right. Right. So the inspirational living and it kind of all runs out through your whole life, and it probably sets it up very well down there. I've seen some of your pictures. It looks like a good, clean, healthy living all the way through and through, with from what you eat, from how you just interact with other people and help other people and just live an inspirational life. Do you want to tell me about some of the things that you do inspirationally with people, and tell me about the plant-based foods? I haven't eaten meat in many, many years, and I'm not 100% vegan, but it interests me, and the healthy living is really important, especially now, and so. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing for work, even?
Yeah, sure. Well, how I said that Bali had pulled me in is because it was a kind of perfect melting pot to really hone in on all the different healthy aspects of the ways in which I'm trying to then spread out to people. So diet started for me when I was in Ottawa, and I tell people this a lot. I had quite plaguing dis-eases, and I separate those words: dis-ease, discomforts, and illness that weren't being solved by conventional medicine. And so at that point, I looked, in my desperation, I looked into nutrition and recognized that a lot of the food that we're eating was harming my health. And so it did pair into my world travels as I went on this quest to keep looking to cultures to find out what they're doing naturally and studying natural medicines. And so that was a big part of my path, is that I realized what worked for me and how many people don't know about it, and how many people are still eating really inflammatory foods and cancer causing foods, and most people are not talking about the food aspect. So I completely dove into that, and I felt like this was my mission in life, was to learn this, because I felt so strongly attached to it and I was receiving all these benefits from it. So I did do that. I paired my quest, my travel around the world, with learning from different cultures. And now, being kind of settled, I say kind of settled in
Sure.
Bali, this is where I center in and I'm able to start to put that content and information out in different ways that what I've learned. So I recognize not everybody's going to go like I did and go live in the jungle in Central America with shamans. Not everybody's going to do that. But since I did, and now I'm in Bali and I have kind of this healthy lifestyle set up for me, that I'm able to reach out to people in different ways like this. This conversation with you is a great way that I found that at first was very traumatizing, terrifying to me because I didn't want to be on these kind of shows. But then I realized how many people can be affected by that might not have had the same exposure that I, have been granted in this. So yeah, so I just kind of work with people online and in person. I love as much as possible, and just finding out what's going on with them and what modalities that I have or techniques that I have learned that could help them to get in touch with their health, wellness, and passion. So that's
Right.
kind of my summary.
Well, it sounds like if you live it, you can teach it and you can share it, and you're living it. And how you share it is kind of the tricky thing. For me, I understand that anytime that you try to impose your will on someone, want someone to get better, and you try to impose it, it's like an intervention of sorts. And people don't usually react well to an intervention. But if you put that information out there and you kind of live it by example, and you keep consistent with what you're trying to do, and then people will act, somehow they'll turn around and come and at least be interested enough to listen. And that sounds like what you're doing. It's hard to tell someone, you should start eating some plant-based food. They don't like that because it's change is difficult, even though they may know it intellectually, but they know that it's a commitment. So I wanted to ask you about, is there anything, is it vegan that are you completely vegan?
I am vegan.
Mhm.
That's what I identify with. But just like you said, I don't try to throw that in anybody's face as what they should do, but
Sure.
just give it as an option that was very beneficial to me, and give the information as best as I can, because I wasn't one that would have ever listened to that either. So I can 100% empathize with being like, no, I can make my own decisions. And so it's just the information. But yes, I identify as vegan because I believe more, and this is going to be just a second, because plant-based, the difference between plant-based and vegan is that with veganism, you just don't use animal products at all.
Right.
And plant-based, and a lot of people don't realize this, but plant-based, you might still use leather or honey is a big one. These kind of animal products that aren't directly eating meat or dairy or anything, or eggs or anything like that. But so for me, I just try not to use any animal products as best as I possibly can.
Right. I think a lot of people don't realize either that there's things that that you put on your skin, and there's things that put it, wash your hair with, and everything. There's lots of animal stuff in there that people don't really kind of. I think some people know about, but they kind of just don't want to. Don't want to talk about. And so being vegan it's a pretty thorough cleansing of your system that we're used to living. For health reasons like I saw my dad kind of had some issues health-wise. He was from the South. I grew up in the Midwest, and the kind of collision of those sort of eating habits lend to some poor health sometimes. And so slowly, there wasn't any sort of like epiphany moment for me, but it slowly just sort of like happened for me. And I know I'm healthier for it. But tell me about, did you want to talk about the regenerate money, that system, is it the seed system? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so seeds, the tagline is regenerate money.
Mm-hmm.
So seeds is a system, it's a movement, it's a culture. It's much bigger than an organization or a corporation. And what its main purpose and vision is to regenerate money. And so there's been a focus on the financial system because there's a recognition that the current financial systems that are in play are actually funding degradation of the planet. And there's a lot of different ways in which that happens, fossil fuel industry, aviation industry, animal agriculture industry. Big industries are being funded and subsidized by our taxation that are going into the degradation or let's say, for people that might not know what I mean by that, but like the bad stuff happening to the world.
Sure.
And so Seeds has come along with a mission of a bunch of passionate people that really want to regenerate the planet and restore it to a natural system where people are being rewarded for doing good for the planet instead of I'm, super rich because I'm exploiting the planet. I am this fossil fuel industry mongrel and I make all this money. And so Seeds is just wanting to give money, power, and reward back to people that are trying their best to make the natural world livable again, breathable again, and thriving again with all living beings. So my position in that is called the passion purveyor. And it's really like a health and wellness coordinator. So I get to check in on everybody, see how they're feeling passionately, if they're coming to their role excited. And that's really fantastic to me because I think that so many of us get stuck in what we think we must be doing. And then we live this life and we're not passionate. So I guess if you really wanted to put my role in a bubble, it's to make sure people are really passionate and excited about healing the planet.
Right. So is Seeds a organization that's headquartered near you, or is it international somewhere that you're part? Just tell me about the organization itself a little bit.
It's decentralized and
Mhm.
our team is completely global.
Got
So
it.
it's fundamentally impossible to get everybody together in some capacity or not. So we have a lot of Zoom calls and meetings where people are waking up in the middle of the night or listening to recordings, but it's really fascinating that way because every person that gets involved has an equal say and voice. And what I mean by that is it's not top down. It's quite pancakey.
Right. Well, that's cool. So what is what's a like a typical day for you? I mean, just basically, it's a place that I've never been to, and some people that are listening are probably thinking the same thing. And it just looks like a beautiful, beautiful place, and the idea that the inspirational, just feeling and vibe must be incredible. The color of the water, the color of the sky, the water, falls and things like that, and the plants, and it just must be an inspirational sort of thing. How do you like soak up all of that in one day?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. And thank you for making me, be more thankful for being here because, when you're right in the middle of the belly of the beast, sometimes you forget about it. And so
Mm.
when you first asked me that, I was going to say, I think my day would be quite similar no matter where I was because I often fantasize about, going, quote, home and being with my family and being in a different climate. But that's what the human mind does. But, being here in Bali, it can be super inspirational for all the reasons that you mentioned. But for me, my day looks like I wake up. I always start the day off with a big glass of water. And I actually mention that because it's game changing and a lot of people don't do it, but we're dehydrating overnight and it can give you so much more energy to get through the day. So I start off there. I go and I do my workout, whatever that is. I do mental health, emotional health practices, which could be meditation or journaling or something like that. Try to stay off my screen. And a lot of the time after that, it's, working on seeds actually. And that can be in many different ways. And being that we're so unique in how because it's a culture instead of a corporation and how we operate, it's kind of how I choose to interact on that day. So it could be creating a workshop for the team. It could be filming videos because I do tutorials for
Hmm.
them and in different capacities. It could be having different check-in calls with them, but most of the day it's either that or creating content for my health and wellness brand, Cece Heart, which is in various capacities. There's lots of food involved, so that's really fun. Is the recipe creation, which I put the final products up on Instagram. It's probably
I
seen
was
that,
just
huh?
going to say there's got to be recipes involved in this, right? Yeah,
Yeah, there is.
that's
But
awesome.
one little thing that I'm working on is actually writing down the recipes as I go. Because one thing about being so active in passion as I am is that when when one is acting in passion, oftentimes we fall into the flow state. And I'm sure you know, being creative as you are, that flow state where you're not thinking really, you're creating, right? And you're kind of in this blissful state. You've entered into that, right?
Well, sometimes it's blissful as well as there's a deadline creeping on me. You know, it's a tough some sort of a spot. But I do know what you mean. Where you're in a zone that has to be nurtured in some way. It has to be protected, and you have to be able to allow it to come out. Because, I mean, if I get a call at the wrong time and I accept the call, which is only because I'm generally in my career working for someone with my creativity. It's not like as a film editor, for example, I did that for many years and still do it. But a lot of perception is that you have this love, you love to be by yourself, you love to be in a dark room, and it's like, no, not really. I like to be around people, but that's where it has to happen. And it's a tough place to be, but when it starts to happen, and if I was to be interrupted and have to take a call, I may have to say, the ideas are going to start falling out of my head if I don't get off the phone right now, because they literally will, and they don't come back. They sometimes don't come back, or they come back and they're sort of like connected in a little bit different way, because it's spontaneous the way that we think. You know, it's random access how we think, and not linear at all. I don't know if I kind of went off the track there, but it just makes you think of the creative, the place that you need to be. So I kind of interrupted your whole line of thought there. So you go back to.
No, you
Yeah.
didn't. You actually really played on exactly what I'm talking about. That was a prime example. And so for me, when I'm making a recipe, if anybody intercepts me, it's the same thing that you just said. It's like, oh, now what? Because my train of thought, my inspiration has been it's not ruined, but it's just been changed, it's been transformed. And so I kind of have a rule to just, if anybody ever sees me cooking, to just kind of let me be as best as possible, because I don't really consciously think. And so we've been working on trying to get me to record recipes in that state.
I get it. I totally get it. You're performing. You know, it's like you're like a recipe DJ. You know, it's
Oh, I love that. I'm
that's kind
gonna
of
put that somewhere on LinkedIn, recipe DJ.
right. I mean, it's a spontaneous moment. People would ask me sometimes when I'd come up with, I was sort of, known for having a point of view. You know, I'm a person who has my, it's sort of like when I was a little kid, I had a little spot in the basement where I just made a workshop. I didn't really do anything, and I built it, and it sort of followed me around throughout my life. And then when I would try something in a project or an edit, even in documentaries, where it's like you got to start the story in the middle. Don't start the story in the once upon a time stories is easy. You can always do that, but somehow start it. Just think about it. And people would say, like, even in a commercial, it's like, how did you decide to start it like that? Because I would always have my space. My my first edit was always by myself. I kind of demanded that, partially because back in my day when I started was editing on film, actual film, and it was a very difficult process. You can make a mistake so easily, and if people are like sitting in your room, so half of it was I need my creative space, but I was so young, I was like, half of it is like, I don't want to like cut my hand on the razor that I'm, it's a nerve-wracking thing. But then they would ask, well, how did you even come up with that idea? And I said, you know what, honestly, the drive into work has a lot to do with what happens here in the edit room, because of what you say, the interruptions, or that somebody could cut you off. You could go you could go into the kitchen at work, and the coffee could have just fallen over, and that everything you do affects the next thing. But the free form it's sort of like, it's what happens on the internet a lot right now. Instagram and all the posting, all that stuff is, some people would call it disposable, because it sort of like has a shelf life and it's gone, and then you could always bring it back, but it's spontaneous, I guess, is the point. And if it's a classic, like one of your recipes, you should have it documented, because it can help humanity, right?
Well, I like to think so. I like to think that what we put in our bodies can really heal us on a fundamental level. So
Hmm.
every recipe that I put out there, it's in that headspace is that it's medicine. And so yes, we've been working on ways to capture me in the moment without interrupting that flow. And
Hmm.
so, now I'll have a notepad and a pen like right there in the kitchen with me and write it down as I go so that it doesn't get lost, so that it is out there for people, because I do want to share it. But I do also believe that when we're creating and we're kind of interacting with this unknown creative force around us, where so much amazing art is coming from, is that it's not thinking so much either. So it can be a fine line, tightrope balance of being able to share in full capacity. And that's why I actually started doing Facebook Lives, which are interesting. They're a little bit messy and like the lighting's not always perfect, but it's at least at that time, in that moment, in that space, you can see exactly what I'm doing to replicate it yourself.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting. One of the things that got me into the real people in documentary, even in commercials, before I did feature documentaries, was in college. We studied a couple of films, and one of the ones that we studied was Nanook of the North. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Nanook of the
Mm-hmm.
North was, I call it, and I'm everybody who comes through my program, I offer to them whether they watch it or not, but I talk about it. And Nanook of the North was a film by Robert Flaherty in 1922. And he went to the Great North and filmed an Eskimo family. Nanook was the leader of the family. And what happened, this was like the first time an Eskimo family would be introduced to the Western world, or to the world in general. And he shot this beautiful film. He got back to wherever he was editing. I don't know where he was editing, but you know, he had a cigarette that blew up in his editing room, and the whole film went up in flames, and it was destroyed. So what do you do then? Which leads to the dilemma of the reenactment in documentary. So he said, well, I'll go reshoot it. I'll go reshoot the documentary. And what happened was he went and reshot it. But what happened was that the camera, that it was almost like doing a nature film, because Nanook and his family never had seen a camera. They didn't know what it was doing. But the second time they knew what it was, and they started to play on the camera, play for the camera. I call it the first reality TV show, and it's not as spontaneous. He's like, remember when we did it the first time? Go, and there's a scene especially where he, as I remember it, Nanook is like doing like some stick fishing, and he catches a fish out of the ice, and he pulls it out, and then he's like just completely acting like some of his act on camera, and it really changed my way of thinking about things in real time. Real time is, there's, I do a lot of fixing and editing, generally I have, but this whole idea of, like you say, the spontaneity of a Facebook Live, and it's messy, but it's real. And if you did it over because there was a little thing, it'd be like Nanook. There'd be little things that didn't quite, uh, you know, play out the right way. So, in that thing where he picked the fish out, he actually like held it up and then he bit it. He would have never done that. He didn't do that the first time. And maybe he did, but it's just an interesting thing because it's so ancient, but it's so real to me. And when people on camera, people coming up, you look like a natural and can, but people sometimes when they first get going on camera, they're they're not so easy. They're not so at ease in that moment, and it's because it's not a natural thing at all.
That's a really good point too, and I I don't know, my whole strategy, I suppose it's not really a strategy, was always just to be raw with people, because that's what I'm drawn to, and I just felt that was what I was meant to be sharing. And
Right.
so, every step along the way, in my path, I've always questioned it. I'm not so easy to believe until it's working for me. So I love having that perspective, especially if you could see me going through it, because you'll see how I react to it, and that I don't just believe it for the sake of believing it, especially when it gets into the kind of, we call it like woo woo stuff here in Bali.
Right.
So it's always fun to kind of document that in as live way as possible and see how the interactions come in a natural way.
Right. Now, um, part of, I call this series of, it's million dollar stories, right? That's what I call it. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a phrase. It's a figure of speech. It's $1 million. It's a living your dreams type of story. And so it seems like you're living your dream. Would I be right in saying that?
No, yes, but what's fun and what I want to tell people that might be listening to that is that I didn't know this was my dream. And so this is one of the biggest things that I do for Seeds is, well, I'm developing programs right now that get people out of their head being their experience, maybe their past, maybe their expectations or their family's expectations, their schooling, all this stuff that creates this mask of who you thought that you were and what your dream was. And so if I were to ask myself what my dream was when I was younger, I thought my dream was to have a white office in the middle of a super busy city like New York or LA or something. And I was gonna drive, I remember drive specifically a really fast sports car.
Sure.
You know, it had to have only 2 doors, and I had this whole idea in my head. And when I strayed from that, I thought, oh no, I'm giving up my dream. But what I realized on this path, every time something was hard, it was allowing me into my new dream. And so now I say, yeah, I am living my dream, but I didn't know this was my dream until
Right.
I allowed myself to expand on that and be open to it. And so I always say to people that just because you have this dream doesn't mean that it is your dream. And I love for people to really unpack that and, and find out what their real passion is. Because you ask people what their passion is and they just regurgitate something really quickly. But I mean, for me, my passion, what really lights me up is food. But I never knew that until
Right.
I gave myself the opportunity. So I think it's really important, anybody listening, to ask yourself if you are living your dream or if that was like your old dream or if that was a dream that was sold to you. Because, it's really incredible to find the dream that's in alignment with your heart.
Hmm. Do you find some people that have the dream that they were told that they can't pursue? Like someone in their life, I've had that in my life where it's like, well, you can't do that. Other people do that, and so do you help them kind of understand that it's really up to them, their dream, that what their dream to pursue is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we had a situation like that recently, and somebody was acting what they thought they were supposed to be doing, but they wanted to do something else, but they were told that they couldn't. And
Mm,
so what we did was we repackaged that and said, you know what? Nope, you're no longer going to be doing the thing that you might be good at, you might be trained for, you might
right.
be, perfect position to be doing that, but you're not going to do that anymore because that's not what your passion is. And then I assisted her into a role that made no sense. And it was an experimental moment where I felt like people were looking at me, are you sure you know what you're doing? And I said, it's fine. Let's just see what happens. And we put her in this position that she had really, like, I don't know if she knew that she could do it. And she did. And she's flourishing and she's so happy. And the last time I checked on her, she said, I can't believe how much happier I am now when I thought I couldn't do this. So yeah, it's about really asking the hard questions, the ones that cause you to have that reflex that I don't want to talk about it or some sort of emotional trigger, and then keep on asking why. Why do you feel that way? What's the real issue? And then do you have a memory associated with that? Is there something someone told you, in your childhood that made you think that you couldn't do that? It comes up a lot in creativity or creative jobs. Like people think that they can't sing or they couldn't possibly learn to code or they couldn't possibly learn to edit because they're this age. They think that they can't learn this new skill, but it's just not true, especially if you're passionate and excited about it. Of course you can. That's what you need. You need to have a reason to do it, and then that will push you through.
I like how you say you have to unpack it. I say unwrap it, and some things like that, because you get in those conversations and somebody will, for me, it's my it's my brain says I should just be interjecting what I think, and what I really uh, have developed, and it's part of what I think really makes that connection with somebody is when hey, you put the art of listening into play, and you find somewhere where you're going to go. You've got a moment where I think I use that term nonlinear, where you kind of connecting the dots in a session with somebody, and I'm not talking about psychology or anything like that, but it's just like you touched on something and you just jumped off of it. I can tell that it's either a sticky point or it's something that you really are interested in, but someone somewhere down the line might have told you you couldn't do it. So they avoid that. They avoid some of the things that they're most passionate about, because it's a process of revealing that to someone, because it's embarrassing, and it's a leap forward to put it out to the universe that I really do. Like, for example, let's just use that as singing for an example, because there are some incredibly talented people that have never shared their talent with the world because of something very basic. And it's a beautiful thing when you hear them and you could just ask them the one question and they go back in there. I have people, I have this thing, $1 Million Story Ninjas is my group that I have put together, and I'm getting people, and I know, because I say that everybody's got $1 million idea. It's just a matter of where it is. Sometimes it's in here and it needs to be, like you say, unpacked or unlocked or found. You got to find it. It's in there somewhere. And then a lot of times I'll get that response. Well, I don't know if I have $1 million idea, and then ... but I did change my career, and I did do this, and I did do something that is like, well, it sounds like $1 million idea to me. And sometimes you just don't want to, and that I respect that, because it is a form of modesty in some cases, but sometimes it's like, I love to people to take a credit for some of their wins that they have too. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing when they actually do, like you were saying, it's that person who just didn't think they could do something and now they're flourishing. That's the reward that we get from when someone takes that leap.
Yeah, I really love, what you just said too, is because a lot of us have this negative self-talk that prevents us from really being and showing who we are. I know that I used to be so terrified of the gifts that I had to express them. In 2020, there was the year that I said, I'm not gonna just keep on giving myself excuses why I know anymore, and I'm gonna start doing what I know needs to be done. And it is scary when you put yourself out on the line at first. And I know that people are fearful of rejection, and we have these social commands that we follow, and we never want to be ostracized, and we never want someone to think that we're wrong or that we've done something subpar. We have these high standards for ourselves, but you find that when you step into that passion zone and you're really in alignment with who you are and what you love and what you want to do, that the other stuff kind of just fades away, and it's not as a huge hindrance anymore. And so I love that you're encouraging and empowering people to step forward with what they have inside to offer, because who are we to judge ourselves that it's not $1 million idea? All it takes is one person to come along and say, I believe in your idea. And that verification process of another human being saying, yes, I agree with your evaluation of yourself. And then it can just spread huge. It's how movements and corporations and all things get started.
Right. And it starts small. I mean, it's like the evidence that I have to offer is that when you do take a step, you take you can have any, a lot of the people that I work with are people in transition, people who have had, they might have been living, I think in the course of, you live long enough, you've got a couple of courses of dream situations that you can have. But, in my career, for example, just, is that, the one thing that does hold true throughout all the technological changes in the world and in the media and cameras and digital and nonlinear and HD and 4K and all that stuff, the one thing that's survived is the story aspect of it. We talked about the Nanook story, and the film blew up. That was just 100 years ago. And but what about all the unspoken words? You know what I think is it's interesting about what made me think when we were talking about recipes and the kind of like recipe DJ moments where there is that, before like even like the folk singers, American folk singers like Woody Guthrie and people like that, those people, Jimmy Rogers and those things, the versions of some of the songs that we know that they wrote are only the versions that they actually got recorded. And the word is that some of those people, and there's some artists around now that, they can't really sing the song the same twice. And so it just happened to be the one that they recorded is the one that we might remember. So a story, in terms of like, those stories were still there, but the essence of how they got recorded, the cavemen wrote stories on the walls, and those are the stories. So I'm just saying that, stories going to hang around, whatever format. Instagram's got, all these, things that we have to kind of keep a track of, and it's just kind of fascinating to me. Could I ask you a quick question about, because I think it's a really important part of in diet, when you mention inflammation, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but I think the idea that some people still don't know about the damage of inflammation and the plant-based and the vegan diet, how that can help that and what that means to overall health. Do you have two minutes on that would, because I think some people just sometimes, again, these stories, when they hear it the right time, it will resonate. And I'm sure that most everybody's heard the inflammation story, but they just don't want to hear it.
Yeah, to put it in a story context, just picture this. So I am 20 years old, lying down on my cold floor, smelling dog urine beside me because I'm so sick that I could not get up off the floor. My stomach hurt so bad that I had been hospitalized. I don't remember how many times. I was going to a doctor twice a week. So my inflammation in my stomach was that bad at 20 years old that I could not keep any relationships or jobs. And I was barely passing my university classes. So just think about that. And then now to where I am, let's just jump ahead. And this has been in complete correlation to a plant-based vegan diet. Our stomachs have so much to do with what goes on in the rest of our body, our mind, and our soul, our spirit is what I say, because the gut lining, when it's damaged by inflammatory foods, and to be honest with you, even a plant-based vegan diet can still have inflammatory foods if you're eating highly processed foods that are usually coming in boxes or fast food joints. That kind of stuff is not the healing, really nourishing food that I ever recommend. But when we get back to the roots, the food that's grown from the earth, organic, not sprayed with a bunch of chemicals, not stored with all this the chemistry degree that you need to create to put on a shelf to last forever. When we fuel our bodies with real nourishing food that's got all the energy from the earth in it, and we'll heal our system. And when we heal our system, our stomach and our gut lining, then we heal our minds, because people don't realize that they're eating this food that's like breaking apart their gut. And when their gut's broken apart, it can't connect in the way that it's supposed to our mind. And then you end up with mental illnesses and mental diseases and hormonal problems and skin imbalances and all of these things that people think are normal. We're so tired and we're so aggravated with our circumstances, and we feel so anxious. How many people have anxiety? How many people feel that they have depression? And a lot of that has to do with your gut health, because the food that you're directly feeding your body is harming you. So what I say to people is, if you bought yourself a brand new sports car, no way are you driving that thing to a restaurant and saying, okay, can you fill me up with the fryer grease? So why are you driving your beautiful temple home body into a restaurant and filling it with that? It doesn't make it run properly, and it's harming you in all of the aspects of your life. So, I hope that by hearing that, it just sparks inside of you, well, okay, I care about my body, as much, or I hope more than a sports car. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
feed it what really drives it, and we'll keep it in mint condition so that it's driving for as long as possible, instead of, just having it for this brief moment, acting on impulse, which is when the amygdala is activated because our gut lining is disturbed. But that I could go really off topic and go for like 50 minutes on that.
Well, but to me, the transformative moment was you acted on it. You did something before you accepted that that was the way the life was going to be. A lot of people accept that even in health and in other circumstances. They go, "This is the way. This is my destiny." And if you visualize your life a little bit different from a different point of view, you can see that you've got control of your destiny, and you can act on it, and you can make a correction that can literally save your life.
Yeah.
I completely appreciate you telling that story. That's that moment where you told that story where I can picture it, I can visualize it, and I can feel it. And that's what I hope that people will resonate. That's the story. Those are the stories that I really love, and because I think they're powerful. The connection that you might make with that story is powerful.
Well,
That's interesting.
thank you. Thank you for giving me the stage to tell it, because at first I was, really horrified to share that story because it was so emotional to me. But
Mm-hmm.
now I recognize that so many people are, that passed me on the ground, just wanting to give up because it doesn't feel that there's a solution in sight. But I really encourage everyone to hear this, and deep in their heart is that you are the author of your story. And I know sometimes it can feel like the story is being written for you and that your end has already been written, but I lived proof that I just stopped it right in the middle of that chapter and said, I don't like this ending. And sorry, but no thank you, whoever's writing this story. I'm taking control over it, and I'm going to put it a totally different way. And
Right.
so once I did that, and I demanded that the author that was controlling my story stop writing, it's been so much more for me. And so, just anybody hearing that, just know that it is possible. I know it seems so daunting. It seems hard. Like anything could be hard. It could be hard to learn to drive a car. It could be hard to learn literally anything that we do every day. But it's possible. You can do it. And I believe it will totally change your life.
That's awesome. That was beautifully said. I know it's getting time for us to wrap our show up for today. It's really inspirational to talk to you, about having such clarity on leading other people through a transformative thing that you've experienced. I think for me, I stay in my lane. I teach what I know, and anybody can teach what they've experienced. And that's something that I think people don't sometimes catch on to, is that if you've done something that somebody else hasn't done, you'll find them, or they'll find you, and you can help them with that by just sharing that story and the results. You have the results. That's the thing, is you needed to make a change, but now you're living in the dream because of your results, and the control that you have is something that I completely believe in. We think that it is somebody else's making all the plans for us, and we have I say to people that are we're in control. If we visualize our life as a movie, we're in control of how that movie turns out. And I'm not talking about the end. And I always say we leave room for a sequel, because nobody gets hurt in the movies that we're visualizing and when I'm working with them. So it's really awesome. Now, because what's amazing to me is the connectivity that we have. It's early in Los Angeles, it's late in Bali, but we're still able to connect. And so the idea that you're so far away, or we're so far away from you, doesn't mean that there isn't connection. So how can people find you to
Um,
connect with you?
Yeah, thank goodness for the internet, and we know we have to be thankful for that, especially during this time. So you can find me on my website at cechart, C-E-C-E heart.com. That can really connect you with any other way, any socials, but my Instagram handle and my Facebook page handle are the same. It's Inspiration Sorceress. And yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
When I redistribute the show, I will put those in the comments so that we can have that easily accessible for people. So Cece, thank you so much. Cece Hart from Bali joining us today on another installment of $1 Million Stories. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith, and for waking up so early to meet this time constraint.
Hey, I'm always up, so don't worry about that. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Thank you so much, Cece Hart, for joining us all the way from Bali this morning. I'm in Santa Monica, California, and she's a long ways away, but we made it work. So she's terrific. She is an inspirational activist, and I love that term. That's what she calls herself, and everything she does is inspirational. So I want to remind you to please join our Facebook group, $1 Million Story Ninjas. That's what this series is all about. We talk about people's $1 million stories, and Cece certainly has one in her journey of transformation. So join that group, and what we do in there is we have community. I offer a lot of training, free training, and I share my experience that I have had in film and advertising and my transformation in storytelling. I've been a storyteller for many, many years, and now I help people tell their own stories, which I've done for a long time. So anyhow, join that group, $1 Million Story Ninjas, and thank you, Cece, one more time for joining us. It's awesome.